Hi, I'm Billy Bragg. I'm head of the team that brings Left Field to Glastonbury Festival every year, where we seek to bring pop and politics together with great music and panel discussions and create a space where people can come together and recharge their activism. Obviously, we can't be there together this year, so we decided instead to hold a couple of our famous panels to discuss the burning issues of the day. Although please be aware that these recordings were made a couple of weeks ago, so people aren't up to speed on everything that just happened yesterday. This panel, which is hosted by John Harris, is entitled Back to the Roots, COVID Community Activism and Where It Goes From Here. Take it away, John.
Welcome to this Left Field discussion session. In the absence of physical, real-world Glastonbury, we're doing this online. The Left Field has a great tradition of running discussions and debates through the day, and we're doing the same thing again in the midst of this crisis. And this session is called Back to the Roots, and it's about the reality and the politics of community self-help, grassroots initiative, and all that stuff in answer to all the social problems that this crisis has both caused and sort of flagged up. And we're joined by a panel of three people who I will ask to introduce themselves in turn. I'll go to you first, Jim. Tell me about yourself and your organisation.
My name's Jim Slaven. I'm the co-founder of Edinburgh Helping Hands. We've been going for about 5.5 years. We're an all-volunteer organisation based right across the city, predominantly in the housing schemes. We normally would do free kids football, boxing, cycling, sort of physical activities for kids in the housing schemes, try to encourage them to make positive life choices, steer them away from some of the sort of negative influences that might be there. And obviously in this crisis, what we've done is redirect our volunteers' energies into providing food. So we've delivered just now close to 50,000 cooked meals right across Edinburgh and tens of thousands of survival packs of non-perishable food and toiletries. And we're now transitioning that into tons of fruit and veg that we're delivering with recipes, encouraging people in working class areas to be self-sustaining, to cook that food themselves rather than relying on us or anyone else delivering cooked meals.
Aviah, tell me about you. You're in East London. Tell me about what you've been doing by way of mutual aid and sort of local initiative in the midst of this crisis.
Well, there was a point like where this the pandemic kind of hit where, you know, back in March, where I think we kind of dawned on everyone that the government were sort of dragging its heels in terms of actually having a reasonable response, and that actually maybe it was going to be incumbent on us to do something. And some people that I know based in Lewisham set up just a Facebook group, mutual aid, saying, right, basically neighbours, let's stick some leaflets through the door saying, look, if you need anything, if you're self-isolating, we can get you prescriptions, food, whatever. And then I set up, within about an hour of that, the one in Hackney. And, you know, I had some background in Hackney with working with Sisters Uncut around housing stuff, as well as London Renters Union. So I knew a lot of the groups that were like in the Hackney area and other boroughs in East London. And yeah, off the back of that, it kind of just ballooned. There was one in every borough, then they were all over the country, you know, thousands, you know, some of them just down to a particular street, some of them covering a ward or a borough or whatever. And essentially, it's just kind of making ourselves available and making it known to people that need help and support that we're here for them, and that, you know, whatever it is their need is, we can do that. And it's, you know, yeah, that's what we've been doing since the beginning, really.
And just to make it clear, have you ever done anything? I mean, obviously you've campaigned and so on before. Have you ever done anything like this before?
No, nothing quite like this. I've done a bit, you know, community organising in that, but I've never, you know, been involved in coordinating or like, you know, part of trying to figure out how, you know, we create a structure where everyone, you know, makes sure that as many people know about this as possible, and that we've got volunteers and that we link people up and all of that. Never been involved in anything quite like this before, but it's been absolutely amazing.
Pip Donegan in Middlesbrough from Pipsco. Tell us about what Pipsco is, why you started it, what it does, and I'm interested to know how it's changed you as well, because I mean, Aviah's just sort of alluded to that, because this affects not only the people at the receiving end, it changes the people who are doing the delivering and so on, right?
Yeah, so I'm Pip Disabled Mum. I'm a disability activist, although quite new to the world of activism. And I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and Behçet's syndrome. So basically, when the pandemic hit, I was shielding. I was one of the many people that was, being protected from this virus. Quite quickly, when I wasn't able to book a Tesco delivery slot or any other supermarket for that matter, I started worrying about not only my family, but everybody else that was going to be in that same position of not being able to get food. Government food parcels didn't kick in this area until 5 weeks into the pandemic, when the first government food parcel was dropped. So that was 5 weeks. So we didn't know that at the time. All I knew is that, so many people in my support groups and my friends weren't able to get food. So quite quickly we said, well, we need to do something about this. I need to do something about this. So I sat down with my husband and my support worker and said, this is going to be a massive issue. What are we going to do? So I'm sat in my spare room at the moment that we actually turned into an accessible food bank. So we deliver food all over Teesside. And that's really changed since the onset, where I said, right, well, what I'll do is I'll order wholesale, and then I'll just basically ask people what they need. We'll order it in wholesale and people will pay for their food, because a lot of food banks are saying a lot of people were requesting food parcels that could actually pay for it. So we started doing that on the first week. I got loads of families that came through and said, yeah, we can't access food. So we started doing that, and then we started having families in financial difficulty. So we went, right, okay, pay for what you can afford, and then we'll top up your food parcel to make sure you can get through the week. And then we started doing emergency food parcels when food banks weren't delivering, and we were hearing from Citizens Advice and from Mind and from other charities that there was no way of getting food from a food bank to a family that was shielding, or a family that was self-isolating with COVID, or a family of a disabled parent, or a single parent with a disabled child. Just wasn't accessible to them. They could get a food voucher, but they couldn't get the food from the food bank to the person. So that's when we sort of changed over time, when supermarkets started, expanding their output, and government food parcels started to drop 5, 6, 7 weeks into the pandemic. We now just do free food parcels, and we've sort of rebranded ourselves as Pipscore, the accessible food bank. So we now just get food to those people who can't get to a food bank for whatever reason. And we're referred to by Citizens Advice and Mind, and we've got quite a few other referring agencies now, where when they talk to somebody and they would have given a food bank voucher and they just can't get food, they come to us and we deliver to their doorstep.
And you've never done anything like this before, that's fair to say?
No, never. No, I was a chef in the Royal Navy before I became ill, and that's sort of the closest experience that I've got, really.
Now, I want to ask each of you in turn, maybe starting with Aviah. I get the sense, and Pip's just sort of referenced this a bit, that what you're responding to has maybe shifted or changed over the 12 weeks of this pandemic, right? Can you give me a sense of that, really, that your sense of the urgency of people's needs and what those needs are, and what they relate to in their lives, and how that's changed from the start of lockdown to now? Aviah, what's your sense of that?
Yeah, I'd definitely say the kind of work we're doing has changed a fair bit. Early on, a lot of people were shielding. A lot of people, early on, there was all the issues with people stockpiling food and that became a bit of a problem for a lot of people being able to access things. A lot of people came forward saying, look, I've got money, but I just can't get this baby formula, or I can't get these nappies. It's not a financial issue, they're just not there. And so then it would just be about putting call outs around through our networks to see, has anyone got this baby formula, that nappy, blah, blah, blah. And lo and behold, usually someone's got it and they're quite willing to share it. So there was a lot of that going on sort of day to day. Then that kind of calmed down a little bit in terms of not being able to access food, and the stocks got reshelved eventually. And now, actually a lot of it is kind of, the stuff around universal credit it has persisted longer than a lot of other issues. So, we've kind of found our feet a little bit in terms of getting food to people, and not everyone's shielding, you know, to the same extent as they were then. But some people still have not got their universal credit sorted, still have no income, and, you know, can't get their electricity, their gas, and food and stuff like that. So at this point, it's kind of trying to support them and make sure that they've got everything they need week on week, whilst also trying to figure out a way to address the fact that, you know, they're going weeks and weeks and weeks without an income. So yeah, those are the kind of longer term repercussions economically of what's been happening with the pandemic, even as other things have kind of calmed down and subsided a bit.
Yeah, so crudely put, in the initial stages, it was about the illness itself and people who were shielding and self-isolating and shortages. And now you're moving to, it's about a particularly sort of deep, wide, prevalent version of what we've always had, let's be honest, which is deprivation, want, need, people simply put running out of money. More and more it's about that. Jim, Jim, tell me about Edinburgh and your sense of that, and maybe how what you're doing and what it's answering has shifted over this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's different parallels there. I mean, we spoke at the beginning of the pandemic, and Helping Hands initially, we thought we'd be in this 2 or 3 weeks. We'd done some food distribution, as you know, at Christmas. We had food collections to distribute to communities. So we had a little bit of background in that. So the idea was people would donate some food to us, and we would then give food boxes to pensioners or people who were shielding, self-isolating, etc. It very quickly became apparent to us that there was a much greater need than we even realised. So we then started opening kitchens where we could provide ingredients, we get cooked meals, and then we have a whole distribution network. So that became a bigger operation right across the city than we had initially anticipated, if we're honest. But also exactly the same points came up there about benefits, about people struggling, about the fact that us giving the food to people was really, that was a symptom of the problem. It wasn't the cause of the problem, their hunger for their need for food and meals. So we now also have a partnership with Citizens Advice Edinburgh. So every one of our cooked meals and every one of our survival packs includes a hotline, a card with a hotline number that people can phone to get professional advice about benefits, about housing, about employment. And the idea there is that we're trying to provide some sort of wraparound support for them. We're also doing mental health support for people as well, online keep fit videos. So we understood quite quickly that we were going to be into this for a bit longer, but also that we were having to fill a vacuum, because the time we first got into this, one of the first things Edinburgh Council did was shut all the community centres, shut all the council offices. So people were literally abandoned in working class areas. The voluntary sector, as soon as the council shut their buildings, the voluntary sector took that as an opportunity to disappear. So the poverty industry fled as well. So we literally were left with just our volunteers in the local community thinking, right, okay, let's identify the most vulnerable people in this community. Let's look after our neighbours. Let's try and put some support in place where we can. And quickly that spread across the city. So we've now got all the housing schemes in Edinburgh covered in that way.
I was going to come on to it. It was a question I'd got written down, Jim. When I met you in Edinburgh on that day, and I watched Helping Hands organise the biggest food bank collection I've ever seen in my life. It's fair to say. I mean, you know, tens of tons of food going into these removal lorries, then being distributed across the city, was an amazing thing to see. And we talked then about this question of, well, where's the state, right? Because I suppose people on the political left have this idea that if all else fails, there's always the state. And there's the public sector, right? And you've just said that your feeling in the communities you serve and are part of, crucially, in Edinburgh, there's a feeling of you're on your own, right? Yeah. And I wonder, in Aviah's case, what does it feel like in East London? Is the state there? We keep hearing about, it's the return of the big state, right? But if the big state had returned, I guess you wouldn't be doing all the work you're doing. Where's the state and the public sector in your field of vision at the minute?
For me, it's a good question. I suppose it kind of depends on which bit of the left you're on, really. How you feel about the state and whether it's the state's responsibility. I mean, definitely years ago, I was, probably much more of a sort of social democrat or whatever, but I've become increasingly sceptical of the state's capacity or even relying on the state to fulfill this need for people, because actually it hasn't done. And even those gains that have been made around the welfare state are gains that can very easily be taken away and are being taken away and have been taken away. And so, I'm a little bit like, well, we can spend all of our time trying to win those back, or we can try and figure out a different way to do that, and to meet each other's needs, and the way I see it, also build power within our communities. So, like, you know, it's not just the point of, for me, you know, looking after each other. It's not just about making sure that you've just got that tin of beans or you've got that prescription. We're trying to actually create a situation in which we're looking after each other, and that we're a strong, healthy community, and that actually that we're skilled up to be able to do things for ourselves and be self-sufficient. So yeah, I personally, you know, the older I've gotten, the more skeptical I am about, you know, whether or not we should be relying on or investing too much in the state with this stuff, because, you know, what I've learned is how quickly we were as a community in Hackney of neighbours. London, people barely ever talk to each other normally. To be able to create a system of support within a few hours. And, like, you know, we're actually better at the state at doing that. If you were to have a next door neighbour who was an elderly person who needed support, and you wanted to rely on the state, how long? A few days before anyone contacts them. I can get them something within 10 minutes, you know, because I'm next door. So, like, actually it works more efficiently and more effective, and it safeguards people because we all know each other, and so if there's a problem we can deal with it quickly. So, you know, personally, yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Right, we're squarely into the politics of all this now, it pleases me to say. Pip, from your perspective, tell me a bit about that, and then I guess also as part of the same question, when we last spoke, when you were in one of the films that I work on for The Guardian, you talked about your hope, really, that the politics of disability and so on might change in the midst of this crisis. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, you know, like, just going on the last question about the state, a huge amount of disabled people felt forgotten about, and like just left to their own devices to basically fight for themselves. Like, they brought out this shielding guidance that basically said that this small proportion of people were going to be shielded, and they were going to be looked after, and they were going to receive a food parcel. But my friends that are bedbound, that have Hickman lines, that are severely ill, that are on palliative pain meds, weren't included in that. You know, like,
there's a terminological thing. What's a Hickman line, just so people know?
A line into their heart where they get fed nutritions and food, so they have like complete diet through the heart, basically. You know, they're on complete IV feeding. They're bedbound and can't get out of bed. They rely on carers to come in and get them dressed on a morning. Not shielded. Those who literally have IV, that rely on nurses coming in and taking daily bloods and feeding them via the heart. Not shielded. Those that are, you know, paralysed from the neck down and require carers to feed them and change it. Not shielded. Like, there is so many people out there that were not shielded, that received no support at all, no government food parcel, nothing for them, you know. And then carers started, you know, dropping like flies because some of them were shielded because of conditions that they had. And then agencies struggled to maintain that demand of carers. So then people who relied on shopping calls and stuff like that just didn't get them. I mean, I got a family that came to us like completely desperate, and they actually knew me through a friend of a friend, and they contacted me and said, I don't know what to do. My carer hasn't come for 2 weeks for a shopping call to get food for my daughter and I. Like, these are people that are severely ill, a tube fed, like mum's tube fed, daughter's got severe cerebral palsy, so daughter's in bed all day, and they had no support. They had carers coming in to do bath time and change them and get them up on a morning, and they were saying, can you go and get some shopping? No, your shopping day is a Friday. Carer just wouldn't show up on a Friday. Then they said, well, we have to take you shopping to go shopping. But she was, you know, at home self-isolating and they couldn't go out. So how does that work? Because the carer couldn't take them shopping. So
on this other question, right, we're in one of these Zoom moments when one of my family intrudes. Like, Pip, I was going to ask you, as well as that, give me the bigger sort of political picture about how you hope this will change attitudes maybe to disability and all that, having emerged from this crisis, if we ever do.
Yeah, I think, well, that's just that it's so big that there isn't like a small answer to that one. Like, there is so many avenues that need to change. Like, I think, one, the benefit system. So many people who have never claimed benefits in their life before, ever, have realised how hard it is to live off benefits. Like, how hard it is to live off such a small sum of money when you're paying like £600-700, probably more in London for rent and for basic bills. Like, I think, yeah, the benefit system is just, people have just gone, wow. Then there's the care sector as well. You know, we're relying so much on this private care sector who are paying agencies like through the roof to provide this care, that actually one small thing goes wrong and they can't provide that care. And then, like, what's left? You know what I mean? The care that they're providing is just substandard. And I think that everything about the care sector sort of needs looking at after this and going, well, actually, is it fit for purpose? Like, these people at the top that are taking so much money, it's just not. It needs looking at massively. And then there's the accessibility around food banks and stuff like that. Are they fit for purpose? Are they accessible to everybody who needs to use them?
That brings us on to the question of the future, which I'll ask you about in a minute. It's interesting that you three obviously have never met each other or spoken to each other, and yet you're all talking in very, very similar ways about what you've done and sort of what it means. I wonder, do you have a sense of this as being some sort of moment of change and that it's sort of resonating everywhere? And are you conscious of yourselves as being part of something very big? I wonder, Jim, do you feel like that? You were an early pioneer of all this, it's fair to say.
Well,
does it feel like the idea of spread?
I mean, what I do find interesting is that, as you say, Helping Hands for a few years have been doing this type of work, which is essentially, what are we doing? We're trying to sort of reintroduce or reinvent for a new world that idea of solidarity that we had grown up in working class communities, but we felt was missing. And there was a sense in our communities in Edinburgh, certainly, that for kids in the summer, playing football was all a cost, boxing clubs was a cost, and people who couldn't afford that cost were economically excluded. And so we had this idea, well, why don't we give these people the very best, so professional footballers and coaches, etc., in the housing schemes, all free, and we'll do that as volunteers, but also we won't take any funding. It'll all be about solidarity, it'll be about neighbours helping neighbours, trying to rebuild that sense of community, and no harking back nostalgically, but recognising that these communities have changed through decades of neoliberalism and that it had to be done in a different way. So we do try to do that. And I think this crisis has maybe opened up a whole load of other communities to that idea that maybe it was just below the surface. People were thinking the council will provide that, or why is that charity not providing that, or why. I think people now recognise when you have a problem like this, the problem with these organisations are maybe well-intentioned, they're maybe nice people, they're maybe progressive lefties or whatever, but ultimately they're all salaried. And they're answering to their funders, not the community. So we need, in my view, exactly just like Pip's saying about the sort of the social care end of it for disabled people, for working class communities, we need to rethink this whole poverty industry. That's what we need to be understanding. They are nowhere for us. Like,
this needs explaining to people, because a lot of people won't have heard that term before, and I was very interested in it when we first met and you used it. Can you just briefly explain what you mean by the poverty industry?
Well, what I mean by the poverty industry is the network that exists between the state, between philanthropists or big businesses and their foundations that are funding charities, and the voluntary sector, who call themselves the third sector, as if they're independent of state and business, who actually they're funded by and answerable to their funders, who are the state and big business. So that network, that relationship, that's the poverty industry. And it's important to say, a lot of the people who are working in it are doing their very best. You know, a lot of them are maybe well-intentioned, so it's not a criticism of them, but it does not work for working class communities. It does not work. In Edinburgh alone, the poverty industry is worth millions of pounds and the housing schemes are getting worse, no better. And when we have a pandemic, a public health crisis, it's reliant on volunteers to step up. We're not taking any funding, we're getting no salaries to feed their neighbours. So where are these people? What is the point of this funding? Now that's a sort of counterintuitive thing for somebody on the left to say, but I think we need to have a discussion about working class control in working class areas.
Aviah, you'd probably agree with that, I dare say.
Yeah, 100%. I guess in terms of, whether or not this is a moment of change, yeah, I've kind of like gone between, like at the beginning I thought, wow, this is really amazing. This is really exciting. But I think there are dangers like this. You know, we've got this mutual aid network, and what I don't want to see it is replicating the same mistakes of previous movements of turning into an NGO and turning into the kind of thing that Jim's talking about. Like, it must stay, you know, grassroots and funded by the community and accountable to the community. And I think, you know, the dangers, there are so many dangers and so many ways in which movements have been destroyed in the past because of that kind of industry. It's kind of becomes like an industrial complex of its own thing. And, you know, like one of the things that kind of crops up a lot that is so different, you know, in London we have, for instance, a lot of migrants who need support. Some of them undocumented, can't trust any other organisation to go to because of the hostile environment is going to threaten to take their data and, you know, then do a raid on their house or whatever. And we're absolutely clear, you know, that's not going to happen with the mutual aid group here that we're working in, because, you know, we're not gonna grass anyone up. We're not gonna pass anyone's data over. You know, we're here to support you. We don't care where you come from. We don't care what else you do. And if you need food, you know, we saw recently that because of those fears that a lot of undocumented migrants have been disproportionately hit by COVID because they're so scared of asking for help. They think that asking for help is going to lead to their deportation. You know, and NGOs have engaged in all of that. You know, they've been you know, getting into contracts where they're basically passing that data over. So we have to be really, really careful to avoid those mistakes and be completely independent and here just to support community members and accountable to the community in that sense. So yeah, I completely agree.
Pip, I'm going to ask everyone this in turn, but Pip, it'd be easy to think that I'm not going to talk about the end of this because the end of this might not come for several years, right? But like, I don't know what do we say when it begins to recede or something, that you'll stop doing it, but you're going to carry on presumably. In other words, is this you for a long time, do you think?
It wasn't. It's sort of not as easy. It's not as cut and dry as that, is it really? Because when I first set this up, it was for COVID. It was for that initial, you know, problem that I saw. Now that problem sort of dispersed when all of the families that we supported went back to supermarkets, because initially what I set up was basically a go-between between a store and people, because we had no funding whatsoever. Then we started getting people in financial crisis, so then I had to find food and I had to find money from the abyss, from nowhere, by knocking on my neighbour's door saying, can I have some tins of food for this person that lives down the street? So then we started doing that, and now we provide emergency food banks, and now I've found the accessibility issues that come with food banks. So it's sort of changed from that initial, I'm just going to be a go-between, it's just going to be from COVID, to, oh my God, how do disabled people access food banks? And what about people who are paralysed? How do they get it? What about parents with disabled children? How do they get food? And then there's just this massive gap, this massive crack, and then speaking to citizens advice, and I'm like, well, what do you do? And they're like, well, nothing. If they can't get a food bank, if they can't get to a food bank, they can't get food. And I'm like, what? And then speaking to Mind and them saying, yeah, there's this massive crack and nobody's done anything about it. And I'm like, well,
you're going to have to carry on. You're going to have to carry on.
We can't shut. Like, we can't, I can't just stop giving people food that need it. Like, these people need food. And like, I haven't put any limits on it. So there isn't like a 3 package limit in 6 months. I haven't done any of that. I've said, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're legal here, whether you're illegal, whatever your religion, whatever your dietary requirements, like, I will find food for you. I have learned so much over the last 3 months about different religions and what they eat and different dietary requirements and different illnesses that require different food. I've learned so much about that. And literally I'm sat in front of like 6 different types of milk, from soya milk to coconut milk to oat milk to like literally like gluten-free pasta and milk-free this. And I've learned so much. And it's been absolutely amazing having them volunteers on board, but we still get no funding. Like, I still literally just beg for food from different organisations. And I think going forward, it's lovely that we've got this grassroots project, and it's lovely that it's not answerable to anyone and there's no red tape. Like, if the freezer's running out of corn and meat, then I just get somebody to go to the butcher's or somebody to go to Asda and get it. And I haven't got that red tape of having to get two people to agree and sign out the money and stuff like that. But going forward, to get funding, to turn this into an accessible food bank, to get a venue, I'm going to have to look at a charity or a CIC status to carry on. But it has to continue because...
That's the point. It has to carry on. Now, Aviah, before I do a last question, because I know you're involved in interesting discussions about this, what's the future of mutual aid in East London or elsewhere from your perspective?
Well, yeah, I definitely think we, essentially the pandemic has kind of highlighted things, as you said before, that were already there, and it's kind of, compounded all of those issues around poverty, around food poverty, around, isolation that were already there, but it then became seriously compounded with the pandemic. So, whatever happens in the next few months, weeks, years, whatever, with the pandemic, it's so clear that we are going to have to be able to continue to do this work. I know a lot of people who really want to, I'm sort of in touch with different people in part of the mutual aid network all over the country who really want to do this work and know this work is not going away, and also can see there's politics through this work as well. There's people becoming radicalized through this work, through supporting each other. It is genuinely mutual. It's not just we're charity heads, everyone's helping each other and learning as they go along, learning about each other, learning about how the best way to do it, how to do it without, coming across like you're being a charity, blah, blah, blah. People really want to continue to do that. So I think, I would like to see a network of social centres continue to do this work around food, benefits, housing, whatever it is that people need. They will continue to need, regardless of this pandemic, regardless of what happens with it, whether we get a vaccine or not. Now we've created a little bit of a structure, and people are now working together in that structure. I'd like to build on that and create something a little bit more concrete, a little bit more solid to continue that work. That's what I'd like to do, yeah.
Now Jim, it's taken as read that you're going to do that because you existed and did that amazing work before this, and you're going to carry on. This is the last question, it's a big question. Somewhere within this might be a different vision of society and the state and how things work and what community is and all the rest of it. Is that right, Jim? Do you sense that even though it's distant and very often it's not terribly helpful, the state perhaps could learn from some of this? Do you think? Can we talk about reinventing the state in the context of what you and so many other people are doing?
I think we can certainly talk about reinventing politics. That's certainly for the working class what has to happen. I think we can see the political models broken down. I mean, what we're about is trying to identify community leaders within the working class, traditional working class areas. So all our groups and areas, it's neighbours delivering to neighbours. So it's no people coming from one area into another, knocking on strangers' doors. But that isn't just about the food distribution. That's also about us trying to support people, trying to encourage people to take a bit of ownership of their own community. Because what's the fundamental problems in terms of the political system? Yeah, if you look at Edinburgh, none of the councillors, none of the MSPs, none of the MPs, they didn't live in our communities. And none of the middle class missionaries that are employed to work in community work, none of them live in our communities either. So what we're trying to do is that idea of solidarity, not charity. It's about people taking some ownership and some responsibility within our own working class communities to say, actually, we can do this stuff. Not only that, we can do it better in the state and we can do it better in the poverty industry. Now, what's required is some sort of infrastructure and support and shared experiences like we're doing just now. That's what we need to do. I think that's the future for working class communities, rather than looking for somebody, a new political party or an old political party or the state to listen to us. No, let's not wait on that. How many more chances are working class communities going to get? Not very many, probably. So I think what we need to do is get a grip of this right now. And this pandemic, hopefully, can at least be an opportunity for us to learn the lessons that all us activists, all us volunteers that have put the time in, we need to find some way of sharing those experiences to hopefully, well, at my age, nearly 50, hopefully for younger people coming through, it didn't make the same mistakes. Let's not wait on political parties saving us. They ain't going to save us. Like, we need to do it ourselves.
Brilliant. And to close, Pip, is an interesting question. Obviously, this has been an awful experience and still is a terrible experience for so many people who find it impossible. And there have been 60,000 excess deaths, we're told, and all the rest of it. But I don't know, perhaps the one positive that comes out of this is that communities know how to organise themselves and help each other in a way that wasn't clear 12 weeks ago. Do you feel like that there's some optimism in the midst of all this? Pip first.
Yeah, I really do. Like, looking at the community spirit that is built and the amount of people are volunteering for the first time in their lives, and many people are actually, coming forward and saying, "Oh, what can I do to help?" And I've made some great new friends out of this as well. And, people are talking to each other. When I look out my window, neighbours that never used to talk to each other, but the clap for carers on Thursday night were talking across the garden fence. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, normally we live in quite a hostile environment with such and such neighbours not talking to each other, and everybody's joined forces. I've had people seeing the amount of traffic coming to my house to pick up food parcels and come and ask what I'm doing and volunteer to be a delivery driver and do it. People contacting me on Facebook saying, "I see what you do. Can I join you? Can I help?" And it's been absolutely amazing. And I think that shouldn't stop. People shouldn't stop talking to the neighbours. People should continue what they're doing and continue that community spirit, because that's what we're really missing. People talking to each other and showing some love.
Love, a word one doesn't hear in political conversations very often. Aviah, just to finish, I've asked a couple of people this lately. If I gave you a time machine and said you could go back 12 weeks and everything would be back to normal, would you jump in straight away, or would you have second thoughts? Because in some way we might be learning things that are useful, and maybe the world in its own strange and unpredictable way might have improved in certain ways.
Nah, you can't go back. I was depressed about the election then anyway. Got other things to worry about now. The world's moved on. No, I think we've learned a lot. I think, it's like interesting. I think, I've seen people talking about how pandemics do create this kind of, reflection within people about, the way things are and the way society is run and things like that. And we have seen, not only with mutual aid, but a massive explosion, like a big political moment is happening at the moment, not just in the UK, but globally. Like, we've got Black Lives Matter. People are fighting for a different way of being, a different kind of society. And the pandemic seems to have brought into really harsh focus just how tired and angry we've been for such a long time about the conditions of our lives, and that actually maybe in this moment it's a moment to kind of think, well, maybe we can change that. I really desperately hope that that does happen, and that people keep going with that and keep fighting for it. But it definitely feels like something is shifting politically in a lot of people's consciousness and in their political action as well. So I always feel quite optimistic, but I feel because you got to be at the end of the day. But I feel very proud and humbled by the amount of work that people are prepared to put in, and to look out for each other, and that gives me a lot of optimism about a different kind of society.
Right, on that note, the motto of the Left Field on the T-shirts and all that, it always says, recharge your activism. And I would like to think in our own small way, the last 30 minutes has probably served that purpose. That was brilliant. Thank you all three so much. Jim Slaven in Edinburgh, Aviah Day in East London, and Pip Donegan in Middlesbrough. Thanks very much. Hopefully Glastonbury will happen next year in the real world, and we may see each other there. Thanks very much, everybody.
Hopefully. Thank you so much.